All right, this is going to be a fun video because this video we get to speak about all of my mistakes and devastations in 2024. Luckily, I walked away with a lot of really valuable lessons that are quite deeply rooted because of the nature of all these fuck-ups. So I made a little list to get us started here. I'm kidding. That's not how big my list is. I was just joking. It's just a little list. I got six lessons for you. So the first 5 are business-oriented lessons. So lesson number 1 has to do with starting a second business. Big mistake. So a friend of mine in late 2023, I guess, approached me with an idea that synergized with my current business, or it seemed to synergize. I own currently a painting company. It's an operating painting company. We paint buildings and houses in British Columbia. And a friend, he's like, let's start a home service company, which is a lead distribution company for home services. And I'm like, well, that's our industry. There's synergy here. Like, this sounds like a really good idea. And it was a really good idea. But, eventually, as we kept going, the distraction became more and more clear. And the lack of focus and the loss of momentum in the first company was starting to become quite obvious for me. The business eventually also did fail for non-related issues. Well, it's hard to know for sure if it was non-related, but before I get to that, the first lesson in this was starting a second business preemptively before the first business is fully completed. And what I mean by that is automated in a way that actually doesn't require me, the founder's attention in a deep way for its growth, for its continued growth. So we weren't there. I had no business starting a second business. Some people can do it. It's very rare. Most people can barely start one business. I'm in the category of I can start a business, but I need to focus. And that's what I should have done and I will be doing moving forward. So that was the first lesson in that. The second lesson I learned out of that first lesson, it's like a branch out of it, but why the company also ultimately failed as well was I ended up realizing that this company, this lead distribution service, was actually turned out to be more of a technology-based business. It was going to be a technology play. So meaning you need technological expertise to grow it and develop the strategy. And both myself and the partner weren't technical founders in that way. So I didn't think that made a lot of sense to grow a company that's technically oriented without technical founders. You'd be outsourcing the core product, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think that's a mistake, is to try and outsource your core product. You kind of end up in the drop shipping kind of an arena where you're just a middleman, and it's not exactly the best type of business. Yeah, so it's not the kind of business I wanted to be in. And so that was that lesson. Lesson number 2 is hovering right next to lesson number 1 there, which is starting a third business, also with the same attitude, which is synergy. I thought, okay, well, I run a painting company, and I was looking to get into digital marketing, and my friend Matt, my best friend and roommate, was just like, let's start a digital advertising company for painting companies, because that's what you need right now, and other painting companies would need that too. Then I'm like, this is great. It synergizes, right? Also ended up being a very big distraction, because now I've got 3 businesses, but how do you get these businesses off the ground takes an incredible surge of energy and capital and money. I had already put 30 grand into the first business, or me and my partner had put 30K into the first business, which is sunk cost. It's gone. So that failed. So we lost money on that. This second business, we also lost, or third business, we also lost a bunch of money on when it failed for the same reason, which was lack of focus. I think that particular business could have gone off the ground, but again, without the attention of the founders to really take it off the ground, or an incredibly large amount of capital to pay someone to bring them in, doesn't make a lot of sense. So huge failure again right there, but further refinement of that first lesson, which is just staying the course and staying focused and not getting distracted, but by the monotony of growing businesses, right? Like, don't get bored with what you're doing. That's a really stupid reason to diversify is boredom. So that ended up not working. So the third lesson I learned in business in 2024 was trying to outsource my digital advertising. So it's been a few times now. I've tried outsourcing digital advertising for my painting company, about 4 times now. And last year I tried again with my roommate, but and I eventually ran out of money. I ran out of money for not because it couldn't have worked, but because I didn't have a big enough budget put aside because I was too busy putting my money into all these other startups. Stupid. You got to pick a thing and then get it right, and then you move on to the next thing. So I have been avoiding learning this skill of digital advertising for quite a while now, several years. Now, I don't need to be a master at this, but with the day and age that we live in, I got to know not just the basics. I got to be competent. And I know the basics. I'm okay with this stuff, but it's time to become more masterful with this. Not necessarily so I can be a digital advertiser, but in the future, in order to manage other digital advertisers and employ people and even outsource in the future, you got to know the basics. And it's time to learn this skill. Every year, I always pick a couple of skills, usually 2 skills that I want to develop. I think it was last year I wanted to get into like videography, learning the basics of filming and making videos like this. So I got into that. That was the skill I wanted to start. This year, the skill I really want to dive into is digital advertising. How does SEO work? How does paid advertising work, right? How does the basics of web development work? All that kind of stuff. I'm diving into it and I'm owning the category and I'm just embodying it and trying to have fun with it, to be honest, as well. But it's, the skills that we don't want to learn sometimes end up being the ones that we will benefit the most from. And I got burned on that as well. So a lot of money got lost trying to basically launch digital advertising, but with no real awareness of where I'm going with it and just leaving it in somebody else's hands. Even if you trust that person, right? It's still a testing game and you got to have the budget for it to get it right. So yeah, the other lesson I also realized with that is when you outsource your advertising, I also realized that if I was buying a company myself and I was buying a company that didn't have their own in-house marketing system that they got their leads from and their revenue generated from, I think that's actually a big disadvantage. And I think it actually makes your company worth less. So when I think about resale of a company and building for sale, even though I'm not trying to sell my company, but having that division of the company, the digital advertising and the marketing system in-house, that's super valuable. And so I want to build that as an in-house asset of my company as I grow. So that's a lesson. And I'm really happy that I'm finally going to own this thing and put in the work to do it, right? It's just a skill that will serve me for the rest of my life. So, but this is a lot of really short form of some pretty serious lessons I've learned. I mean, the first lesson, that's 30 grand. The second business, that was another 12 to 15 grand, just in cost, by the way. This is not even cost counting the opportunity cost. Outsourcing the digital advertising and doing the ads, and that ultimately none of those worked. That was another. And we built a website on the new platform that didn't work. Well, it did work, but we ended up having to build a different website after. That was another 15 grand or 10 grand. The next lesson was trying to build my own CRM. So we tried to, as part of our digital advertising business, we tried to in-house the CRM as part of that system and part of that offer. And when it all didn't work, I basically didn't have a company to be our CRM for us. We didn't have a professional CRM system backing us. So now I have finally found a CRM that's going to work for our business. This is our 4th attempt on our CRM. If you don't know what that is, it's a customer relationship database where we house and store all our customers and the information and all that, and our workflows, all that kind of stuff. So for us, what I ended up realizing is just having a company that's niche to my industry is very valuable, that I know will be in business for the long haul. This is my fourth attempt trying to get this right. And now that I have it right, I'm realizing how grounding it feels to have this part of the business sorted, which is kind of like, it's like the foundation where everything comes into, and it ends up being a really valuable asset. Again, when you sell the company, that's a core asset. And when it's not organized, or it doesn't provide good reporting or good metrics, it all has an effect on us, consciously and subconsciously. And so, yeah, trying to build my own CRM, that was the mistake. It's not that you shouldn't do that. It's that we tried to do it way too early in the business, and it's not important. What's important for us is scaling what we actually do, which is our core offer, not tinkering around on like the CRM database in the back end, right? Just hire people who know how to do that and that are already doing it for like other painting companies or home service companies. Number 5 is a little bit unrelated and different to those first 4, but this one has to do with contracts and writing good legal agreements. So in that first partnership I spoke of, the second business that I started at the start of the year, we ended up having some disagreements, and it ended up falling on some legal agreements that weren't as concrete as they could have been, and it led to ambiguity. And that ambiguity led to a lot of stress, arguments, and threat of legal battle. Now, when you think about business in general, especially my business, everything has to do with legal agreements, right? Like we write contracts with stratas, we write contracts with homeowners to do their house, paint their homes. We have employment agreements with our staff. We have subcontracting agreements with the subcontractors. Like when these aren't bulletproof, they need to be bulletproof. That's the lesson. So one thing I was grateful for is that I had really strong legal agreements that protected me. And that I'm very grateful for because they were written many years ago when I started the business. The lesson, however, nonetheless, is that lawsuits and stuff can still happen, and there's even more room for growth in mastering this side of the business, which is legal. And I guess another lesson that stemmed out of this potential legal situation was I realized that how I was structuring the company financially. One thing I was doing was I was actually keeping all of our retained profits from the company within the company. And the lesson is that you shouldn't do that, right? Like I was basically using the profits from the operating business, keeping them inside of the shelter of the corporation, and I was buying other assets like stocks and Bitcoin and things just inside the business because I didn't want to pay them out and get taxed. So it was kind of like a tax strategy is how I was kind of thinking about it loosely, but I was also just not overly thinking about it. So the lesson I learned was it doesn't make sense to keep cash beyond your operating required cash, the cash that you need to operate your company, inside of the corporation. You should either get it out into your personal name and buy assets, or you should have a holding company that you pay it out to and buy assets within your holding corp. That's a really valuable lesson. And again, it makes me feel more safe. So now that I've taken those measures, the company just has what it needs. And if anyone was to ever sue us, whether it was like a strata or a homeowner or something, for any reason, you have a more limited liability. And yeah, I feel like I should have known that. And I think I did really know that. But when it came down to it, this was an opportunity. So whenever I get a lesson, I always, some of these are expensive lessons. And I always just think of the value I'm getting from the lesson, right? That's really what you're paying for, right? So, a $20,000 potential, basically 20 grand on that lesson in terms of dealing, not including opportunity cost, in just dealing with the legality stuff of all this. So that lesson ultimately was a $20,000 payment to get this kind of a lesson, which is protection for myself as I move forward as a business person. So that was lesson number 5. Lesson number 6 is going to be the last lesson I share, even though I think there's more lessons in 2024. It was a good lesson year. But this particular lesson is not about business specifically, even though it had a tremendously large impact on my business life. And it goes back to focus. So in 2022 is when this really started, and it went through 2023, and it even dripped into 2024 and kept on impacting me through the karma of the whole thing. But it was having 2 girlfriends. You think that having 2 companies is hard? Having 2 girlfriends is a whole other thing, right? You talk about focus and a split energy, right from the root down there all the way up. I'm telling you, the whole thing, you can't perform as a businessman when you have this level of lack of focus. So that's a whole other video, but you might see the theme in all these lessons, which is focus on what you're creating. Get clear on a vision, devote yourself to a vision, and then build it, and take your time to build it properly, and do that for as many years as it takes. It could, and I mean, especially with a business, allocate 5 to 10 years at least to get something done. It takes a while to build this stuff. Like I had no business doing two businesses and trying, like, there's so many things in here that I just had no business doing right away. So the blessing and the lesson in all of it is to hone in, focus on what's important and prioritize, and then get to work. So that is going to be it for this video on all my lessons in 2024. And we'll see you in the next video. I wish you all the safe passage in your sacred journey of life and business.